Hello, everyone. We are the Coverage Inc. team. I'm here with Jim Cirile and Anna Siri. And, well, we're going on to get rep now. So we just wanted to give you a few tips, things to look out for, things we want to see in your scripts, things we would rather not see in your scripts. Anyway, so without further ado, tips and tricks. Anna, go for it.
Hi, everybody. So I think the first thing that I would say is that you have to make sure that your script is about something, which I know sounds really, really simple, but I don't mean a plot, but I mean something emotional that the audience is going to be able to connect with. We like to talk about theme, and that's not necessarily something that you have to go into thinking, oh my God, my story needs a theme, but it's really the underlying building block of every script, good script that you see is about something. So whether your character is going to learn something from it or whether just the audience is going to learn something from it, you need to make sure that when we're reading the script that we have some sort of emotional connection to it that's going to make us go, oh, I remember this, because otherwise it's going to get lost in a sea of other scripts that are just like it.
Yeah, you might have a cool story idea, but like, what are you really trying to say? There's so many times when we read a script and at the end of it, it's just like, give this thing a reason for existing, really.
Absolutely. Jim, what is your first tip or trick?
Okay, so I mean, one of the things that I like to see right off the bat is for the writer to kind of announce what the genre is and the tone, and then stick with it. A lot of times we see, screenplays in particular, and pilots sometimes too, where, they kind of find the tone as they go along, or worse, they set the tone and then change the tone. So I'd really like to see, like, let's say you're writing a comedy, for example. Your first scene should be comedic. It should set the tone. It should say, oh, you're reading a comedy. And then whatever tone that you're setting up front, that should be the tone more or less for the rest of the movie. Don't change it up. All right. Your first scene is emblematic in that way. It sets up the expectations of the reader. So know that whatever it is, whatever genre you're writing, the first scene, the first couple of pages needs to demonstrate that so that people know what they're getting. And so that sets up the expectations in their mind. Oh, this is what this is, and then deliver the goods.
Absolutely. So I'm a stickler for structure, and in particularly the setup. And if you've ever gotten coverage from me, you might have heard this, tired old metaphor, but it's like building a house. So without a good foundation, it doesn't matter how cool your first floor is. It doesn't matter how roomy your attic, the thing will crumble. So in a setup, we want to get to know our protagonist. We want to get to know the world. It's important because if we don't understand the world, or if we don't care about the protagonist, or worse, don't even know who the protagonist is, why should we go on this journey with you? Why should we spend 2 hours in a world that we don't understand with characters we don't care about or know anything about? So structure, 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 setup.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I'm distracted by the dog.
This is Tanya, everyone. She's our mascot too.
So cute. Did you get her a shirt? So my next tip is actually about pilots, which I love. I love pilots. The thing that I have noticed recently is that a lot of people are still writing premise pilots, and it just doesn't fly anymore. There used to be a point where you could write, for someone, if you don't know, a premise pilot is when you just set up the story and that is it. And, there used to be a time when that was what everybody was writing, and that was great, but we've kind of moved beyond that. The two things that a pilot needs to accomplish these days: first, it needs to set up the world of the story. It needs to, tell us where we are, who our character is, what they're going to be doing, all that. But the second thing that's really important that I think a lot of writers are not doing at this point is showing us what a typical episode of the series is going to look like. So your first episode has to have the same shape as your 10th episode, as your 50th episode, and so on. And there's a gazillion scripts out there that you can read that kind of give you that hint. Breaking Bad is the one that we like to use because it's such an excellent pilot. But, it's not just the starting point doesn't get him to start cooking meth by the end of the episode. He starts like right away. And that's kind of what we want to see. We want to see the characters doing what they're going to be doing over the course of the series in that first episode.
So that's actually a great example, because like a lot of times people think like, well, how can I get involved in the story world if I don't know who these characters are and what's driving them? And so we get basically the whole first episode is an origin story. But Breaking Bad is a great example of how you can have your cake and eat it too, because we start off, we jump right into the action with this great teaser where it's like, what the F is going on here? Then we flash back and we get 20 minutes of who this guy is, what drove him to get there. Oh my God, he's got cancer. He blah, 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 blah. And then we get to the actual meat of, the story of the episode, which lays the groundwork for every episode to come. All the elements that we come to know of a typical Breaking Bad episode, it's all in there. So it does all of that, which is great. So I don't think it needs to be, all plot, although it can be. That's fine too, because we can infer character through plot, but there's got to be at least a balance in there.
Absolutely. And speaking of character, another one of my pet peeves is the character arc. So I was talking about setup before. This is the start of the character arc. This is where we learn what our protagonist's life is like and what his or her Achilles heel is. What do they need to learn to become a more fully formed, more successful person? What is the lesson they need to learn? And, there are failed character arcs, which I'll talk about a little bit, but also, the amount of character arc will differ depending on genre. You'll have a lot more character arc in a drama than you have in an action movie, for example. And often you can see programmers that really, programmer action flicks that don't really have a character arc. However, you will not break in with a programmer action flick. And since you are submitting to Get Rep Now, we are assuming you're trying to break into this business.
Yeah, we'll break into Hollywood anyway.
Yes. And so what you need is a character arc. That means your character, because of the events they're going through in your movie, need to learn to become a more fully formed person. And, there can be failed character arcs. For example, the movies that come to mind are Up in the Air or Young Adult, where the characters try to arc. They really do. And well, they fail and they kind of end up back in the same place they started in. However, albeit a bit more mature, maybe a bit wiser. So there can be a failed character arc. However, there must be a character arc if you're trying to engage us and if you're trying to break in.
The interesting thing about the failed character arc movies, those are great, is that they really speak to kind of where we're at as humans and society. So even if the character doesn't change, there's a really strong takeaway, I think, for the audience. Like you walk away from Young Adult and you're just like, wow. But, we all know people like that. So I think it really does speak to the human condition in a way.
Right. It's also not a new idea. If you go back 500 years, you read Macbeth, there's a failed character arc right there. So this is something that we've got baked in to our sort of anti-hero idea of what anti-heroes are. They're never quite going to get it.
Yeah.
So I think my next tip would be that writers tend to struggle with dialogue a lot. And, because we're reading so many pages from these hundreds and hundreds of entries, it's one of the things that really stands out. So the best advice I have about dialogue would be to read the dialogue aloud, read your scenes aloud, even if it's just you standing in the living room with the script in hand, staring at your tablet or whatever. Read the dialogue aloud, because you'll notice really quickly when it starts sounding clunky, and you'll notice when it's feeling very expositional or people are saying exactly what they're thinking and there's no subtext. All that stuff is going to come out if you think of it as theater. So that's really one of the easiest ways that you can tighten up a scene, is to go through and see what you're skipping over and what words stand out to you.
And never write the words "as you know" in dialogue. Never.
As you know.
People do not say this in the real world. You know, it's like they never bring each other up to speed on things that they already know.
As an example, as you know, Jim, we're running this company. It's called Coverage Inc. And Coverage Inc. does screenplay coverage.
And we were founded in 2002, as you know. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about voice real quick. So this is something a lot of writers really forget, and it kind of boggles my mind, because why are we writers if not to present our voice? Isn't this what this is all about? I mean, sure, we all love telling stories and stuff, but that's fine. But you know, voice is where you show producers, where you show agents and managers that you've got the goods, how you turn a phrase, how you say things, you know. You can, and there's many different kinds of voice. You know, you can have an acerbic smartass voice, you can have a mellifluous voice, you can, I mean, there's just so many different ways to do it. But the point is, the voice should be distinctive, and it should be something that really kind of grabs the reader right away, so that on page one they go, oh yeah, this person knows what they're doing. You know, when you nail that voice, I mean, voice is the first thing people really appreciate about your screenplay. And if it's not there, if your sentence construction or word choices are just like not really well thought through, then you're failing at one of the key things, which is voice. So go back and reread your stuff and say, what's the snappiest I can make this? What is my voice? You know, what type of character am I? You know, and bring that on the page. Make sure it's clear from jump.
Absolutely. So another one of my pet peeves, the accidental ensemble.
Yeah.
What is that? Oh, our protagonist haven't seen him or her since page 11. We're now on page 32. Whatever happened to them? Are they indeed the protagonist? We've been lost in like 12 subplots and 18 different characters. What's going on? In general, if you find that this is happening, I think it means that you haven't actually beaten out your story. You don't have a beat sheet. In other words, you don't know what you want to do with your character, with your protagonist, what story you want to tell, where you want this story to go, and how you want this story to go. So if you find you have an accidental ensemble, might want to go back to a beat sheet.
It all comes down to structure. We've seen this so many times where scripts come in and all of a sudden we're following a secondary or tertiary character for pages and pages. Yeah. And it's so many times it's because the writer doesn't know what the protagonist should be doing, because they're not following a good structural template. And I'm not saying one needs to be a slave to a structural template, but things happen in movies at certain times for a certain reason. There's so many of these methods out there which are basically solid structural foundations that if you follow them, you probably won't have an accidental ensemble situation going on. It's just so many times because the writer doesn't know what they're doing and they're like, oh, well, I guess I'll follow this character.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I like to suggest most in that regard is even if you're not following traditional structure, you know, the basics of character arc are always going to apply. What does a character want? What are they going to do to get it? What do they stand to lose? And what do they need to learn? And the answer to those 4 questions, that's a movie. That whole right there. You can, however those pieces come together, that's a story right there.
All right, Tanya, what else have you got?
What else have I got? I think it's Anna's turn. Do you have anything else?
Is it? Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, this is the simplest one. Please do not forget to spell check. Please don't forget to proofread. This is the number one thing that trips up writers, because the minute we start seeing typo after typo after typo on the script is when we start having concerns about whether or not the script is worth looking at. And that's a real problem. I mean, we want to make sure that the writer knows what they're doing. And if you give us the impression that you don't, then that's a problem.
We should probably have put that one first. I mean,
first and last.
Like, why would you not run a spell check? I just don't understand that. In fact, I'm going to tell everybody right now, if you send in something that's full of typos and you didn't bother to run a spell check, we are going to feed your script wawa. Okay, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say also too, it's make sure that your characters are spell checked. The number of times we get a script where you have somebody named Philip or something, and it's spelled with 2 L's in half the script, then 1 L in the other half of the script. Drives readers crazy. Really, really drives them crazy.
Or they change the character name and they do search and replace, but then there's the misspellings of the original character name, which they never spell checked and they never caught. So all of a sudden, Michael becomes Marvin or Jose, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable that you're going to have a typo or two here and there. It's almost impossible when you're constantly rewriting and changing the script to have a perfectly clean script. But there's a difference between 1 or 2 little mistakes and page after page after page of formatting. That's a problem. So
okay, so but let me just say, like, if you're in the club, like if you're already a working screenwriter, you've had a bit of success, you've got some heat on you, whatever, all this stuff is way less important. People really don't care once you've been accepted. It's just getting past the gatekeepers where all this stuff is really, really important. Okay. I mean, look, it's important all the time, but I'm just saying, if you go get a Quentin Tarantino script and you're like, this thing is full of typos, what the hell is going on? It's because it's Quentin Tarantino. He can do whatever the hell he wants. No one's going to go tell Quentin Tarantino you misspelled the word legs 8 times in his script. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that is true.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
so you have a final tip before I go to my final tip?
Yeah, I do have one more. And this kind of goes along with what we were just saying, which is please learn to self-edit, people. When you go back and you reread your stuff, it shouldn't just be. I mean, yes, experience it as if you were someone else. Try to look at it. Come in cold and experience that afresh. That's great. But also be saying to yourself, is this the best way that I can say things? Is this the most efficient use of my words? Screenwriting should be about brevity. It should be being snappy. It's not a novel where you can write big, long chunks of prose. People don't want that. They roll their eyes and are like, oh God, you expect me to get through this? So just go in and, like, if you've got a paragraph and it's got 10 lines in it, that's too long for a screenplay. So please go back and say to yourself, how can I cut this down? What words can I use? Can I lose? I'm sorry. Pretend each word costs you $100. Okay. And you're like, shit, I got a budget of $500 or, whatever it is. I don't know. This is a terrible analogy, but you understand what I'm saying. What I'm saying. Just please go in and edit. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So my final tip of the day, plot logic. Sometimes I give notes and notes, pages of them, in fact, on plot logic, because we have huge spine-breaking plot logic problems. Then we also have little plot logic problems on every single page. And I go through all of them and I make suggestions on how to fix these plot holes, which means I'm putting more thought into the script than the writer. And that's a problem. That is a problem. Yeah. Just think it through.
That's a tough one, though. I mean, lots of times, in our own writing, we'll write stuff and we think it works perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. And then someone else will come along and go, well, that doesn't make any sense. And we go, right. Oh, yeah, you're right. I mean,
yes, sometimes you absolutely need someone else to point it out. However, there are some basics of how things work, how things don't work, script continuity, character continuity. Something happens on one page that's then completely contradicted on the next page. It's always good to read your script. In fact, once you stopped writing your script, put it away for 2 weeks, then pull it out and read it again with fresh eyes. You will find a lot of things.
Yeah. A lot of times when I see things that are plot logic mistakes are actually things that could be solved via research, where the writer just writes something just assuming that this is the way something works. And I go, I'm not sure about that. And then I do a web search. I'm like, no, this isn't the way it works at all. Or, and it's like, had the writer just simply done that exact same web search that I just did, they would have learned this, and spent the 10 seconds of time. It's like that sort of thing where, research is fun. Writers should like doing it as opposed to just making up their own facts.
I think I would add at the end, just in general, because these are a lot of heavy notes. That don't get discouraged. You know, it can be really disconcerting to get a lot of negative notes. And you know, our goal is to make you better writers and to help people advance. You know, and that's why we have Get Wrapped. And our readers are incredibly thrilled every time they read something good. Like I get the emails I get from people saying, "Oh my God, I read the greatest script. We have to put," you know, it's fantastic. That's what we're looking for. So we're actually very excited to read what people are coming in. And even if it passes the first time, that doesn't mean that it will pass the second time. So, you know, if you get an initial pass on your script, but the notes were something actionable, go ahead and rewrite it and send it back in. And we would love to see it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me reiterate that. We love seeing good material. It makes our day when we get a script that's really good. It makes us really happy. So please make us happy.
Look, I know, we all know, all of us here have gotten notes. You know, we all, when we finish writing a script, we all feel good inside because we have accomplished something. You know, it's significant. And then you get some notes back and it's like, oh God. It's hard not to take it personally, but you know, we are trying to help the people. I mean, good readers, you know, who give good notes are helping you move the ball down the field, helping you really make your script as good as it can be. We want you to succeed. You know, we don't want to insult anybody. We want to empower people, you know. So what our goal is, if we do find a problem, we give it to you, and this inspires you to go, oh, actually, that gives me a great idea. And then you take it to the next level. That's a beautiful thing when that happens.
All right. So these were our tips and tricks. And we're really hoping they're helpful to you. And again, we are in the business of empowering you guys. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thanks, everybody.
Good luck with Get Rep Now.